So welcome to the San Quentin Rehabilitation Center, better known by its more harrowing title, San Quentin State Prison. This imposing institution sits like a fortress on the edge of San Francisco Bay, casting long shadows across its past. Its halls echo with the weight of over 170 years of history, each stone etched with stories of violence, survival, and, more recently, transformation. It's more than a prison. It's the final stop for some of the most infamous criminals in the United States. And when you enter San Quentin, the question isn't just whether you'll survive, it's whether you'll ever leave the same person. This place has housed the likes of Charles Manson, the infamous cult leader responsible for a series of gruesome murders, and Richard Ramirez, the Night Stalker, who left a trail of horror across California. But they are only two among many. Serial killer William Bonin, the Freeway Killer, brutally murdered at least 21 boys and young men. Stanley Tookie Williams, co-founder of the Crips, would become both feared and controversial, nominated for a Nobel Peace Prize while on death row. Other notorious inmates included Scott Peterson, convicted of murdering his wife and unborn child, Randy Kraft, the scorecard killer, and Luis Bracamontes, a convicted cop killer whose courtroom outbursts horrified viewers. At its peak in 2015, San Quentin's death row population swelled to nearly 700 inmates, making it the largest such unit in the Western Hemisphere. Imagine that, 700 men locked in limbo, in cells no larger than a parking space, waiting for an end that might never come. Their crimes varied, but their reality was the same, an existence defined by razor wire, regimented time, and the constant choking weight of impending judgment. In San Quentin, silence isn't peace, it's the tension between heartbeats. Inside these walls, stories stretch far beyond criminal records. This is a place where survival isn't measured in days, but in decisions. Alliances can save your life, or end it. Every stare, every seat in the cafeteria, every step in the yard is governed by a brutal, unspoken code. There are no second chances for mistakes. This is a system with its own rules, written in fear and enforced with force. Inmates learn to read social cues like survival maps, gestures, eye contact, language, and posture. Communicate volumes without a single word. One man's misstep could spark a war, and sometimes your past follows you like a ghost, especially if you helped build the very gas chamber that would later take your life, or if the pandemic turned your prison block into a death trap, exposing every flaw in a system stretched to its breaking point. Social hierarchies in San Quentin, as in many prisons, reflect broader issues of race, power, and control, mirroring the inequalities that plague society beyond its walls. Gangs operate as de facto governments, assigning protection, distributing contraband, and administering their own forms of justice. Choosing neutrality can be just as dangerous as choosing sides. San Quentin's story begins in 1854. But even before then, California's earliest inmates were forced to live aboard prison ships. Floating jails meant to keep them contained while the state scrambled to build permanent facilities. The Waban was one of those ships. Inmates were marched off daily to labor in chains, helping construct the walls that would later contain them. San Quentin rose out of sweat and stone, and from the beginning, it was a place of pain. Discipline was brutal. Shower baths blasted prisoners with pressurized hoses. Whippings weren't punishment, they were public warnings. Execution wasn't hidden, it was a show. Hangings were performed in full view, the snapping of necks, a twisted form of entertainment for crowds that gathered to watch. Between 1893 and 1942, 215 men met their end on the gallows at San Quentin. It became so infamous, inmates gave the site a nickname, the Arena. These rituals of death, celebrated by some, mourned by others, shaped the psychological landscape of prison life for decades. And the evolution of execution, from public spectacle to private procedure, reveals a society gradually wrestling with the morality of state-sanctioned death. Then came 1938, the gas chamber. Its debut test wasn't on a human, it was on a pig, but the result was chilling. It took 34 agonizing minutes for the animal to die, revealing that this new method of execution was far from humane, and yet it became the norm. Some of the guards who carried out these executions were changed forever. Amos Lunt, who personally oversaw 24 hangings, reported hearing voices and seeing hallucinations, visions that eventually led him to a mental asylum. His warning to his successor was clear: the job eats at your soul. Then there's the case of Alfred Wells, an inmate paroled for armed robbery who spiraled into a killing spree involving his half-siblings. He returned to San Quentin as a death row inmate and was executed in the very gas chamber he had helped to construct, a literal architect of his own demise. The psychological impact on executioners was real. Men like Lunt often found themselves unraveling, bearing the weight of life taken by their own hands. And for the inmates on death row, the looming presence of that chamber was a daily reminder: your life could end with the hiss of cyanide. Some would spend decades waiting for that final breath. Others would die from natural causes long before their sentence could be carried out. But even within a fortress of despair, moments of humanity flicker. In 1969, country legend Johnny Cash took the stage at San Quentin, performing live for inmates in a concert that would become a legendary album. He debuted the song "A Boy Named Sue," and the inmates roared in approval. In that moment, something powerful happened. A bridge built from rhythm and rebellion. It was a reminder that even in the darkest places, music could stir the soul. It wasn't just a concert. It was a rebellion against silence. That performance came at a time when many inmates had been locked into an existence stripped of identity, and Cash's performance reminded them, briefly, of their humanity. Today, remnants of that emotional impact still resonate. San Quentin's music programs, such as those led by inmate-run bands or visiting performers, continue to bring rhythm to the otherwise rigid beat of prison time. Music, like education, is a form of rebellion in a place where every move is controlled. Let's say, hypothetically, you find yourself inside San Quentin. Maybe a mix-up. Maybe justice didn't work in your favor. Whatever the reason, you're processed, fingerprinted, photographed, your clothes are stripped away, you're issued denim, and you march past grim walls to a 4x10-foot cell that will become your universe. Welcome to your new life. But this isn't just a room, it's a crucible. Every minute here is a psychological test. You're being evaluated by inmates and officers alike. Your body language, your silence, your speech, all of it is scrutinized. First impressions are everything. A misplaced glance can signal disrespect. A soft voice can suggest weakness. But too much confidence? That can be seen as arrogance, and just as dangerous. Here, even breathing feels like a negotiation. Your first impressions matter more than your entire legal defense. The other inmates? They'll clock your posture, your eyes, your affiliations. They'll assess whether you're prey or predator. And if you don't know the code, the one that isn't written on paper, you'd better learn fast. Take your tray to the wrong table at lunch, and you might not eat again for days. Or worse, you might not walk again. In the words of one inmate, the whole cell might beat you. That's the code. You're going to have to figure out why. Cultural lines are rigid here, often racial, and sometimes even more specific. Inmate society within San Quentin maintains invisible but deeply enforced boundaries dividing everything from recreational space to eating areas. These divisions, shaped by prison gangs and ethnic identity, can determine your safety or your downfall. The Aryan Brotherhood, Black Guerrilla Family, Mexican Mafia, and Nuestra Familia aren't just groups, they're institutions. And they don't forgive ignorance. Understanding this social structure is vital, because in San Quentin, a single misstep can define the rest of your sentence. Navigating daily life in San Quentin is a test of awareness, endurance, and strategy. Everything has rules, from the way you address staff to the way you enter a room. Roll call starts early, often before dawn, and missing it can mean disciplinary action. Meals are distributed with military precision. You don't get to choose what you eat, but you must know where to sit. Inmates eat with their racial group, and violating this unwritten rule can spark violence. The chow hall becomes a pressure cooker where eye contact can escalate into conflict. Louis Theroux, in his famous documentary, captured the uneasy choreography of daily life. A prisoner warned him, "The whole cell might beat you," when asked about breaking the code. "You gotta know the code," he added. In this world, codes aren't written. They're learned the hard way. Exercise isn't just for fitness. It's a form of armor. Whether lifting makeshift weights or doing hundreds of burpees, staying physically intimidating can make the difference between being targeted or respected. But the yard is also where gang politics play out in full view. Every corner is claimed by a faction, and wandering out of bounds can mean confrontation. These groups, more than just street gangs, operate like organized networks. They issue orders, broker deals, and enforce their own brutal version of justice. Neutrality is rare. Some try to align with religion, education, or work to stay clear. But even these paths can be politicized, co-opted by gang control, or watched closely by correctional officers. Despite the rigid structure, some inmates find purpose. The prison offers jobs, cooking, maintenance, clerical tasks, and educational programs like Mount Tamalpais College and The Last Mile. The latter teaches coding, entrepreneurship, and professional skills. Prisoners have developed real apps from behind bars. These programs aren't just rehabilitation, they're lifelines. San Quentin's library, classrooms, and art studios offer glimpses of life beyond incarceration, but gaining access to them often requires navigating a bureaucratic maze and staying out of trouble long enough to qualify. And even these hopeful spaces are not immune to violence. The deadliest day in San Quentin's history occurred during a riot in 1971, sparked by George Jackson's attempted escape. Guards and inmates died, and security at the prison was never the same. Dinner follows similar rules to lunch: segregation, silence, eyes down. Nearly 15,000 meals are prepared daily, each one a logistical challenge and a test of patience. Kitchens are run by inmates under supervision, and food can be both a symbol of routine and a flashpoint for rebellion. If a tray is served cold, if a portion is short, tempers flare. Even in a system where food is guaranteed, hunger, emotional or physical, never really fades. And by nightfall, tension returns. Lockdown comes fast and hard. A final count, a secured door, then silence. This is when paranoia sets in. Every creak is suspect. Every shuffle in the tier could mean a fight, or worse. In solitary confinement, hours feel like days. In Death Row's Adjustment Center, inmates are sealed in solid door cells to prevent them from throwing feces at guards. These cells are tombs with locks. With the death penalty halted in California since 2006, San Quentin's death row turned into a legal purgatory. Inmates faced endless years with no clear outcome. Some snapped, resorting to violence just to get back in front of a judge. One prisoner famously admitted to killing his cellmate because it was the only way to get an appeal. North segregation was for low-risk death row inmates. The East Block housed the majority, but the Adjustment Center? That was for the most violent, the ones too dangerous for general population. The psychological toll was immense. Some inmates compared it to being buried alive. But for the first time, real reform is underway. In 2019, Governor Gavin Newsom placed a moratorium on the death penalty. By 2023, the prison began rebranding itself as a rehabilitation center. Some death row inmates have been transferred to general population. Others join programs like Guiding Rage into Power, GRIP, which teaches emotional healing and accountability. These aren't token efforts. Over 1,000 inmates have completed GRIP, and the last mile continues to graduate coders who later join the workforce after release. Kenyatta Leal, once sentenced to life, now works as a tech manager. Change, while slow, is tangible. Then came COVID-19. San Quentin became one of the deadliest hotspots in the country. Overcrowding and poor ventilation turned the prison into a petri dish. More than 2,600 inmates were infected. At least 28 died. The virus didn't care about charges or race. It devastated indiscriminately. Guards fell ill. Lawsuits followed. Families outside wept, helpless. In many ways, the pandemic exposed what inmates had always known. The system was fragile. And yet, from that chaos, more reform came. New investments in healthcare, ventilation, and emergency procedures. A plan to restructure San Quentin into a Scandinavian-style facility focused on rehabilitation instead of punishment. Today, San Quentin stands at a crossroads. The old San Quentin, a place of executions, riots, and silence, is slowly fading. In its place, something different is emerging. A prison where inmates learn, write, speak, and even produce media. San Quentin News, an inmate-run newspaper, tells stories the outside world rarely hears. And while violence still exists, so does hope. Programs now outnumber punishments. Teachers outnumber wardens in some units. And though escape is still impossible, growth is not. Surviving San Quentin was once about muscle and cunning. Now it's also about mindset. It's about resisting despair, building a new identity, and hoping that one day you won't just walk out of the gates. You'll walk out a different person. Because when a place that once perfected death begins to practice life, that's not just rehabilitation, that's transformation. And if you want to avoid neighbors who settle arguments with shanks instead of words, stay free, stay out, because the concrete walls of San Quentin don't forget, and neither do the people inside them. Don't forget to subscribe to Around the World.